Extra, extra, read all about it. Local basketball team looks normal with starting point guard.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Thursday, January the 2nd, and I am your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 11 seasons on various platforms, and I've got a little extra spring in my step today, baby. You can find all my work over on Blue Sky. You can find the show on Instagram. You can also join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server, which was happy last night. What a world! Come join us in our listener community. It's free to join. Link in the description of the podcast. You can also, of course, support the daily and free Locked On Raptors newsletter. We are approaching 1,000 subscribers. All you little sickos out there can't get enough, as it turns out, of them daily posts from me. You get Katie Heindel 4 days a week talking NBA at large. You get Michael Shearer from Basketball Poetry every Thursday. That's today. And also you get Josh Lloyd's fantasy tips, links to coverage of the league, across the internet. It's a wonderful thing right to your inbox for free every single day. You can go to the QR code on the screen, or if you're not watching on YouTube, you can go to the link in the description of the podcast and go sign up if you haven't yet. Makes me feel very good inside when you do it. So thanks in advance for doing so. All right, on today's show, the Raptors won, baby. They're back after an 11-game losing streak and the worst loss in franchise history, which we're mostly going to put out of our brains today and not talk about. Look, I didn't make the schedule. I can't control that the Raptors played that game and then had a holiday fall the next day where I didn't do a podcast. I don't make the rules. I just enforce them. And so we're not really going to talk about that Celtics garbage because there's a fun, real basketball team to watch again, baby, because Immanuel Quickley is back and they have their freaking point guard. It's a beautiful thing. We will get into Quickley's return. We will get into Scottie Barnes having one of his best games of the season, maybe one of his best games as a Raptor. We going that far? We'll get into the rotation now that it seems like they're approaching health. Maybe Friday they're going to have Bruce Brown and RJ Barrett back. Fingers crossed. That's great. We'll get into what the rotation looks like, what it means going forward. We got the good, the bad, and the of course. But let's get into it. Man, oh man. Immanuel Quickley returning to ring in the new year as loudly and as beautifully as you could possibly want. What a thing it is to have point guard play back in our lives, man. It's been a long ride. It's been tough. There have been moments where they've kind of pieced it together, sort of, where Scottie Barnes figured it out a little bit. You know, Davion Mitchell with a couple of moments here and there. Jamal Shead with his ups and downs. No more need to sort of stitch the position together. Immanuel Quickley's back, and on a quote-unquote minutes restriction, plays 32 minutes last night. Seems as though, per Darko Rajakovic after the game, that he was able to keep up his conditioning pretty darn well, as he missed the last 22 games with that UCL injury in his left elbow, and he seemed no worse for wear getting back in the lineup. Kind of a surprise addition, was deemed questionable a few hours before the game, and then all of a sudden, hey, he's playing. Awesome. This is great. Didn't expect it, but super happy to see it. And man, oh man, Quickley, 21 points, 4 boards, 15 assists to 1 turnover. 1 turnover. The team with just 10 turnovers in this game after having coughed up 52 in the previous 2 games. You love to see that. He goes 7 of 16 overall, 3 of 7 from downtown, 4 of 4 from the line, and just made everybody's lives so much easier. He does point guard stuff, and I've been kind of singing the praises of Immanuel Quickley and his playmaking and his point guard juice, basically since like the first little stretch they had him last year. And I get it, right? I think it's been slept on. I think there is this sort of vision of Immanuel Quickley that a lot of the people who are maybe lower on Quickley have. That's like, well, he's an off-ball, sort of once in a while he'll be on the ball, sort of combo guard. And I think if that's your vision of what he is as a player, it makes sense if you're a little bit lower on him, because I don't think his overall offensive package suggests he's going to become some sort of high usage scoring guard who's giving you 25 a night. But I do think if you view him more like I do, as sort of more of just like a straight traditional point guard, then the upside for him really comes into focus. And I think last night was a great example of the point guard stuff that Immanuel Quickley does to affect winning basketball. And look, again, I understand why this has been slept on or maybe not considered. This is not a thing he was asked to do in New York, right? He was a bench microwave scorer for most of his time in New York, although in the few moments and stretches where he had to fill in for Jalen Brunson on that Knicks team, he would turn in pretty interesting performances with the ball in his hands and doing creative stuff and having really big stat lines. That was, I think, a little inkling that maybe the Raptors looked at when they made the trade for him and prioritized him as a target for OG Anunoby. And I think we saw it last year, even in a context where the team was awful, right? He played like 10 games with the actual players they intend to have on this team long term. And then it was a mishmash of Malik Williams and Jordan Nwora and Kobe Simmons and all kinds of guys who are no longer in the NBA. But we still saw Immanuel Quickley in those stretches like have good creative performances, setting guys up, setting the table, making things easier, creating good looks for other guys. And he did that within a miserable context where there was just like very little in terms of actual shot making and finishing around him. And he still turned in like Jose Calderon level assist to turnover numbers. I think slightly better than Jose Calderon at his peak, which is hard to do. That dude was an assist to turnover merchant. Quickley last night, again, he just sort of does the point guard things that this team has been dearly missing. Scottie Barnes' life so much easier because he doesn't have to go create from a standstill at the top of the arc, which is not his position. I know Scottie Barnes is a point guard in some people's eyes. He's not been a point guard for some time now. It has been determined, even going back to early last season when they had Dennis Schroeder running point, and then eventually Quickley was traded for. Like, they made their decision with their actions. They said, we don't think Scottie's like a full-time on-ball point guard. He is not, in fact, Magic Johnson. And over the course of this season, because Quickley's been out, he's been forced to have to play as a point guard, and it's not worked well because that's not where he's best optimized, right? He's not someone who's going to go burn people off the bounce 100 times a game. He's not someone you can run a ton of pick and roll with, especially with a traditional big man, because teams are just going to switch that, and it just gets tough to create advantages. He can run pick and roll with Quickley screening for him, which I think we're going to see a lot of down the, as things progress here, because you get different sized guys, you get mismatches, you get guys that, Scottie can go and ISO and score over and sort of work his magical mid-range, craft over top of those guys. Like, that's going to be a thing they can use more of now. But in the context in which he was playing on this team without Quickley, it just wasn't working. And not to mention, it had been scouted to death over the course of 2.5 months to the point that you really weren't getting much out of Scottie Barnes and the sort of top of the art creation experience. And he was just kind of playing in that position out of necessity because this roster doesn't have other backup guards. They don't have guys you can go trust to go run a bunch of pick and rolls in a game or create from the top. Immanuel Quickley is a guy who can do that, and he's back now. And I was saying it all along, and I feel vindicated today. The poor performance of the team was way more about not having maybe the single most important guy to the functionality of their half-court offense, non-Jakob Poeltl division, I guess, for all but 2.5 games. And it was anything about the sort of makeup of the team or the viability of Scottie Barnes as a best player on a good team. All that stuff was clouded by the injury stuff. And because the injury took a long time to sort out, I think injury sort of blended into just people assuming, oh, well, this is just what the team is now, because memories are short. People don't have patience. If you just sort of take a step back and look, oh yeah, this team's missing like a really important player who they just paid $32.5 million a year to in the summer. It all kind of makes sense that they look like a normal functional basketball team when he's back. And like I said, I think his playmaking stuff is going to really shine here. I think we're going to see him with the ball in his hands a ton, running pick and roll with Scottie and or Jakob Poeltl. We're going to see him, operating in transition the way he did in this game, where head always up, finding really great quick hit ahead passes. My God, watching Quickley make entry passes to Scottie Barnes, getting deep seals. We've not seen that all year because the guards the Raptors have had not so good at making those passes. Davion Mitchell, not exactly that deft touch to get those entry passes in over the top to Scottie. And Scottie, of course, operating above the arc, forced to, work in a position that's not advantageous for him. Now he gets to operate in the places where he can work. And Scottie Barnes gets to be like a power forward. Just because Scottie Barnes is not your guy who's going to go create a million possessions on the ball and be like a heliocentric player doesn't mean he can't be the best player on a good team. Kawhi Leonard needed Kyle Lowry. Blake Griffin needed Chris Paul. LeBron James needed Kyrie Irving with the Cavs, right? Like, This is how basketball works. It's a team sport, and good players, great players even, are often amplified by really good point guard play. And Immanuel Quickley just kind of has that knack. I am a child of Chris Paul and Steve Nash and Kyle Lowry. And I'm not saying Quickley is those guys, but there's that little special like point guard brain juice that's in there with him that I think is only going to be played out more over the next 4.5 years that he's with the team. Like, there's a lot of room for this to improve. There's room as well for his scoring craft, the interior stuff, the floaters, the at the rim stuff to refine and get better as he has more reps on the ball. This is a long game here with Quickley. And if it's a long game, and this is like the first glimpse we're getting of what Quickley can look like with a functional version of this team, that's like really great early returns. Last night is sort of like the very beginning, burgeoning seeds of what this vision of this team is with Immanuel Quickley. And I do think we're going to see him in more of an on-ball role than maybe people have expected because he's just got point guard brain. You know how in The Wire, if you've watched The Wire, where Bunk or Jay Landsman will call people real or good police? I kind of think it similarly applies here to Immanuel Quickley. He is real point guard stuff. He is a good point guard. And I think letting him kind of use those point guard tools where we saw it last night. Teams are terrified of him shooting, and so that gives him space to operate. It gives the whole team space to operate. Every action he's involved in has this extra layer of thinking that the defense has to do because Immanuel Quickley and his three-point threat is there. We saw it on the out-of-timeout possession where he kind of pitches it into Jakob Poeltl. Our pal Esper Henny highlighted this on his socials if you want to go check it out. He pitches it to Jakob Poeltl. He fakes a dribble handoff, cuts down the middle, gets a pass from Yak, quick kick to the corner for Grady Dick in the corner for three. Beautiful stuff. Great offense because of the threat of his shooting and his downhill ability. His handle was rock solid in this game. He was getting into the teeth of the defense, keeping the handle alive, making great reads. Like, this is a point guard's point guard, man. And it's thrilling to see this team have one available to it now. And I can't wait to just sort of watch this thing all come together as they get healthy, as they get their guys back in full, which we might see as early as Friday. Very exciting. We'll get into the rotation stuff coming up here in just a second. We'll put the Quickley love fest to bed for now. I'm sure we'll get to more of it as the show goes on because I'm just so in love with watching a damn point guard play basketball for the Raptors again. Hot damn. We're going to come back on the other side, though, get into the rotation. What is this going to look like if RJ Barrett and Bruce Brown are back? Are the rookies kind of on the outside looking in? Jonathan Mobo got demoted to the 905 today. Maybe that tells us something. We'll get to that coming up in just 1 second here. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time, the single best place to go buy tickets to the sporting events you want to go to. I love going to live events. I love going to sports. I love going to concerts, theater shows, all of it. And Game Time is the place you can go and get your tickets. It's even easier to get tickets for your favorite live events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature helps filter out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Maybe you're looking around. Let me pull up the phone here, see what they got for tomorrow's game against the Magic. Maybe you want to see the healthy Raptors in action. Still kind of the holiday period here. Maybe you're off work. You want to go see the Raptors play on Friday. You can go and peruse yourself some tickets. You can get some upper bowls for like $52 with the best Game Time Picks deal on there. There's a zone deal up in the top bottom right of the screen for $57 for tickets. If you want to go and check out Raptors game tomorrow with the Raptors full complement of guys, fingers crossed, you can go and do that by going to Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Well, it's game time, of course. Back at it here on your Thursday edition of Locked On Raptors. Bring it in the new year, the first show of the year. And hopefully this is not the second year in a row where the Raptors peak on New Year's Day and it's all downhill from there. Really nice to see them get back on the board with a win in this one and to sort of put the memory of the hell that was the last three games against Memphis, Atlanta, and Boston behind us for good. New year, new team, baby. Let's get to the rotation stuff. The rotation sort of sorted itself a little bit last night, although, again, we still have to see what it's all going to look like once Bruce Brown and RJ Barrett are available. They kind of went with an 8-man rotation in this game. It was the starters, Barnes, Poeltl, Quickley, Agbaji, Grady Dick. Then you had Jacoby Walter, Jamal Shead, and Kelly Olynyk as the main cogs off the bench. You got a little bit of time for Chris Boucher. had one great moment and a really nice three at the end of the clock, and then a whole bunch of not great moments. I think Chris Boucher might be on the outs sometime very soon here. Same goes for Jonathan Mobo, who was assigned to the 905 today, which I think kind of makes some sense. We saw just a minute for Jamison Battle in garbage time. Davion Mitchell gets just 6 minutes. I think we started to see some of the indicators of what this rotation is going to take shape as once the team is healthy, which again could be as soon as Friday. RJ Barrett obviously still battling illness. Hopefully he's back. Bruce Brown didn't play the second game of a back-to-back as he's recovering and sort of managing the knee thing. Would imagine we'll see him on Friday against the Magic as well. Then they have 2 days off till their next game against the Bucks on Monday. And so just kind of looking at how this is all going to take shape, I do think what we're going to see rotation-wise is pretty simple. I think it's going to be Quickley, Grady, RJ, Scottie, and Yak as the starting five, the presumed starting five that we have still yet to see actually play minutes together. And then you're going to have Bruce Brown, I think, as sort of the nominal backup point guard, Jacoby Walter, Ochai Agbaji, and Kelly Olynyk as guys 6 through 9 in the rotation. And you may be asking, well, Jamal Shead played so well last night. We'll talk about Jamal Shead coming up in the good, bad, and I think it's probable that he'll get nudged out of the rotation until Bruce Brown gets moved, if he gets moved by the deadline. And then maybe Shead comes in to finish and sort of tidy up and mop up for the rest of the year as the backup point guard, assuming Quickley can stay on the floor throughout the year. I think, the other guys who sort of get excised here, we talked about Chris Boucher. I mean, I don't think there's much to learn with Chris Boucher in this team anymore. I think it's kind of established that Chris Boucher is in the, dying days of his time as a Toronto Raptor. The moments where he's great are awesome. The moments where he's bad are really, really damaging, as we saw last night in the moments where, after he hit that big three, he just kind of had like a series of bad possessions and bad plays on both ends of the floor. That's the Chris Boucher experience. And so I think he's probably on the outside looking in. Davion Mitchell's the interesting one. Obviously, his point of attack defense is helpful, but really tough stuff from him last night. Just 6 minutes, 4 fouls in those 6 minutes, missed a wide open three in the corner. And I just think it's become pretty clear. His offensive utility on this team is just so low. Maybe you can find room for him in lineups with like Quickley and Grady Dick and Kelly Olynyk, but I'm not sure you need to be sort of selling out defense so much just to get Davion Mitchell on the floor. I think they can get by without him. And, again, I think he's someone who probably gets dealt by the deadline for, a mid-league second round pick or something like that, sort of Matt Thomas style. But I just, with Bruce Brown, you want to have him play because he's just like a better player and a connective piece and a guy who can do a few different little things for you. He can play off the ball if you want to run Scottie with the ball in his hands with the second unit a little bit, or you want to run elbow stuff through Kelly or Yak. You can have Bruce kind of playing off of that. And he has like some classic point guard ability with the ball in his hands as well. Nothing flashy, nothing amazing, but certainly a better offensive point guard than Davion Mitchell's been, and probably a better offensive point guard than even Jamal Shead's been so far. And so I think that's why he gets that backup guard duty. I think the interesting one too is like Ochai Agbaji moving to the bench. He was really good last night, really excellent as the fifth starter, 14 points, 5 of 8, 2 of 2 from downtown. A perfect exemplary role player performance. He had a couple blocks, a steal, a nice defensive effort from him against Cam Johnson. There's an argument to be made that he fits in the starting five as well or better than Grady Dick or even RJ Barrett, just because the defense is needed. I think he probably should start, kind of working off the bench to begin with. You got to get a look at that starting five of Quickley, Dick, Barrett, Barnes, and Pirtle. I really think you have to get some tape on that, because I do think the offensive upside there is higher with that group than it is with any lineup the Raptors can throw out there. The fit of Quickley with Grady, and man, Grady last night getting corner threes, open corner threes, a thing we've not seen all year for a guy who was one of the single best corner three-point shooters in basketball last year. It's really nice to see him get easy looks. Darko Rajakovic talked about it after the game. He's like, wow, Grady got spot ups tonight. What a world. Like, that's the Immanuel Quickley difference. And I think he is just like a way more dynamic and probably better offensive player than Gary Trent Jr. was playing within that starting five last year during the February run, where this team kind of had its most representative sample of what this is all supposed to look like, with Scottie Barnes and Immanuel Quickley as the main two guys. And I do think, if you think back to that lineup, it was Quickley, Gary Trent Jr., RJ, Scottie Barnes, Jakob Poeltl. That lineup had a plus 12 nearly net rating over the course of the second most possessions of any lineup the team had last year. Wasn't a ton of minutes. I think it was in like the mid hundreds in minutes. They were around 350 total possessions played together. And yet they were pretty effective, and they were a reasonable defense. They had like 110 defensive rating, which over the course of a full season would have been the number 2 defense in the NBA last year. Obviously, that's not, their true talent probably on defense, but like they were perfectly passable on the defensive end, despite having Gary Trent Jr., Quickley, and RJ out there. I think Quickley's defense is maybe slept on a little bit. He's not like a sieve by any means. He's pretty average for a point guard. I think there's a lot of point guards who are much worse than he is defensively. And I think we saw last night his rotational stuff. He's got a brain for defense. He also talks a ton. You saw him like in the low man spot, even kind of guarding the guy in the corner, sort of there ready to slide over in help defense in the way they were set up in a couple possessions, just talking, yelling out coverages, yelling out screens, like communicating. He's got a brain for defense that I think is going to overcome some of his physical limitations. He's going to become like an average-ish defender, maybe slightly above average. That you can get by with him as your point guard defender. It's the wings where it gets concerning with Grady and RJ, obviously. But I think because you had success with that similar lineup with a less dynamic version of Grady Dick in Gary Trent Jr. in that 5 last year, you got to at least give it some run here. Give it the month of January to see what you got. But the beauty of this season is you don't have to be stuck with anything, right? You can try different things. Guys are going to miss time. Maybe you're resting guys on back-to-backs. Maybe you're sort of, oh, well, he's got a boo-boo. He'll sit out a couple games here and there as you sort of ethically try to tank your way down to wherever they want to be in the lotto standings. Like, there are going to be opportunities to test out different versions of the starting 5. And, like, credit to what they rolled out last night, the Quickley, Dick, Abaji, Barnes, Pirtle lineup in 59 minutes so far this year. Or sorry, 59 possessions, not minutes, 59 possessions. So very few minutes to actually speak of here. But they are roasting teams. They're a plus 23.7 net rating in 59 possessions over, I think, 2 games played, the opener and this game. 139 offensive rating for that group. They crushed it in the fourth quarter against the Nets. There's something there, but like that doesn't mean you don't look at Grady and RJ as sort of the go-to starting 5 that we all assumed would be the starting 5 and see if the Barnes-Pirtle duo, which I think gives you like at least an average floor on defense with the way they protect the rim and the way Scottie's become kind of like a world wrecker, playing his best on-ball defense of his life, after being a kind of bad on-ball defender for much of his career, totally transformed in that regard this year. He's long, he's disruptive, he's causing all kinds of trouble. He makes events happen. He had 2 steals and a block last night. Like, he does everything. I think having him and Pirtle as your back line gives you the room to play with your highest output offensive lineup just to see if they can make it viable defensively, because I do think there's a chance they can. And if they can't, you reevaluate. And this is all the stuff that we've been waiting to see all year, right? This is the chance to finally evaluate what this team is with its point guard and with its players available. It's been a false start after false start after false start to kick off this year. And yeah, they're in the hole. They're not going to make the play-in or anything like that. They're way too far out of it. But there's room here and runway to see what this team has over at least the next couple months. And then maybe you pack it in for a stealth tank in the last few weeks from there, whatever. Either way, like, we get to actually get proper, valuable data to inform off-season decisions, assuming they stay healthy, right? Knock on wood all over the place that they actually do stay healthy over the course of the rest of the year, or reasonably healthy. There will be guys who miss time and take nicks here and there. But for the most part, you hope the worst of their injury luck is behind them, and we actually get to evaluate real, normal, functional basketball with a rotation that makes sense. That the rotation I laid out, like IQ, Grady, RJ, Scottie, Yak, Bruce, Walter, Ochai, and Kelly, that's a real rotation. That's a viable NBA rotation that's going to win you minutes and win you games. It fits. There's a lot of shooting involved. There's a lot of interesting lineup diversity you can kind of play with, whether it's more spacing looks with Kelly at the 5, and maybe you load up with some of your wings and Barnes and Abaji, and maybe Jonathan Mobo still gets sprinkled in as a defensive and rebounding change of pace guy from time to time as like your 10th man. I think there's a lot of potential with that 9-man group, and I really look forward to hopefully seeing it against the Magic on Friday. It's been too long, but like, those are 9 NBA players. Those are 9 guys who are functional, in all kinds of different combinations. Let's just see it. Let's give it some runway here. I'm really, really happy we're having interesting rotation conversations. What a world. New year indeed. I'm feeling great. We're going to come back on the other side, get into the good, the bad, and the things that were good, the bad, and not so good, and the interesting stuff. Oh, God, way to tease the segment, dude. We'll get into that coming up in just a sec, including some words on Jamal Shead. And I guess we'll acknowledge the Celtics loss just so we can say that we did at some point here on the podcast, and maybe not be derelict in duty entirely. We'll get to that coming up in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, the number one sports book in North America. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the action on FanDuel. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has a whole bunch of ways that you can go and throw down some money to pick up a W. Maybe you want to bet on who's going to score a touchdown or how many points a team is going to score. It's a great time no matter what. Maybe you want to go do those in-game live bets. You're watching the game. Maybe you're with some pals. You say, hey, I think they're going to score a touchdown on this drive. You can go back it up and win some money if you think you're going to be right and go and play the live bets on FanDuel with their very easy to use app. Of course, it's not just the NFL. You want to throw some money down on the Raptors on a given night. They were covering like every single game up until the last couple weeks. Maybe you want to go throw some money on the Raptors covering again now that they've got their guys back and against the spread machine they were to start the year. Maybe they can get their groove back in that regard and win you some bucks. Either way, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Wrapping things up here on your Thursday edition of Locked On Raptors, the first show of a brand new year, 2025. Hopefully better than 2024 when it comes to watching the Toronto Raptors play. They've already picked up 5% of their total win total from last year in just one day. That's great. Let's get into the good, the bad, and the shall we? The things I liked, the thing I didn't like, and the thing that's got me a little bit intrigued from the latest Toronto Raptors basketball game, the way we wrap up every single episode of the show here on the heels of a Toronto Raptors basketball game. In this case, two basketball games, because we haven't talked about that mess in Boston on New Year's Eve, which again, we really need to talk about it. Maybe I'll get into it in a second here. Either way, the good, Jamal Shead, mostly, I will say, is the good for me in this game. Another win for point guard play. I'm a little point guard sicko. I love it. And I thought Jamal Shead had some really good stretches of this game where he kind of had a good feel for, the managing of the team. He had a couple possessions where he kind of bailed the team out late in clocks where they needed it. He had a really great drive and finish in the third quarter when things were kind of teetering a little bit with that second unit. He drives, finishes off glass. There's a timeout for the Nets. And then the Raptors come out with their big horses out of the break and kind of push it and finish the game from there. Shead helping to stem the tide of what felt like a bit of a Nets push there in that third quarter. And look, there were a couple rough stretches in his first shift. I think he finished off maybe not on the greatest note in this game as well, where I think in the fourth quarter, he had a couple of pretty iffy shot choices. There was like a really early clock three that I don't think you ever want to see Jamal Shead taking. There was another late clock three where he kind of overheld the ball too long and just sort of forced a shot up. That's going to happen. He's a rookie. Sometimes he's going to have these 90-second stretches where he rookies all over the place. And that's just part of the deal when you're dealing with a second rounder playing in his first full NBA season. It's going to be ups and downs, but I thought in general, really nice work from Shead to be a very tidy backup point guard in this game, kind of hinting at what I think a long-term vision for his next year and beyond for him. Long-term vision for him is, my goodness, like next year and beyond when Bruce Brown is maybe gone and Davion Mitchell's probably not on the team anymore. Like I think we're going to see Jamal Shead just be that backup point guard. And maybe that's his long-term ceiling. But you can do a lot worse than getting like a really dependable, defensively oriented backup point guard with really great passing instincts with the 45th pick in the draft. I thought really good stuff from him last night. And he really, I think, puts Davion Mitchell's job very much into question with this game, even in games where Bruce Brown's not available, if they're doing the injury management thing. I just think Shead runs a team more effectively than Davion Mitchell does. Mitchell is very erratic. He throws all kinds of whack passes. He doesn't really run the team, particularly well. He doesn't have great downhill juice to sort of overcome his lack of shooting, especially when he's like running pick and roll. Sometimes he can do it in like an individual, just break a guy down and score situation, which is fine. But like running the team, he's just not very crisp in sort of guiding the actions. Shead, he's had some issues passing lately where he's kind of gone to the school of Davion and bungled a lot of very easy passes, but for the most part, I like Shead's passing vision and his touch and his feel and the way he kind of sets guys up. I think he's very clearly like a backup point guard ass player, and we like that here in the podcast where we're very pro all point guard play, top to bottom. So yeah, Shead, despite a couple of weird sort of boat-headed sequences, I think was very, very good in this game, and I will give him my good. The bad, I guess we can talk about the Celtics loss very quickly. We haven't talked about it on the show because I didn't do a show on New Year's Day. It was really bad. I don't know what there is to say about it, right? Like, I don't know if I even like how interesting the podcast about this game would have been. It was really ugly. There's no way to sugarcoat it. The first half I thought was sort of spirited. The offense clearly didn't have any juice, but they defended as well as they have really all year for the first half of that Celtics game. And then it all came unspooled in the second half. Scottie looking overburdened as the number one guy. Not a lot of space around him to work with. No finishing with RJ and Grady out of the lineup. Like, it all made sense to me. It sucked. It was awful to watch. It's really funny. This was the first game my wife has watched all year with me, and she was like horrified at what she was seeing. Not surprising. I'm not sure if I'll get her to watch any more games with me. She was kind of half paying attention as Quickley was doing his thing last night, and I was giggling and cackling in the living room. That was nice to see. Quite a change from yesterday or the day before that is. But yeah, not a great game. I don't think it's terribly indicative of much. It was a team at the end of its rope without its good players and without its point guard. And they got their point guard back and it looked like a normal basketball team again. The Celtics are also going to beat you, man. Like, they're really good. As much as they've been on hard times of late a little bit, if they get going from three, they're going to crush you. And they did just that. And they crushed the Raptors. Yeah, it sucks to have that big loss on the board, but not something that needs to be, a grand sweeping indictment of the entire franchise or anything like that. It sucked. I thought the game against the Hawks was rock bottom. Turns out the Celtics game was rock bottom, and hopefully it's only up from here. But yeah, okay, I've done it. It's on record. I've talked about the Celtics game. I'm not avoiding it entirely. I'm not doing my toxic positivity thing all the time. It happened. It sucked. It doesn't probably mean much in the long term because they didn't have their guys. To close things out. Having cake and eating it too. I do think that this team is set up to be able to have its cake and eat it too. The cake being seeing its guys actually play minutes together, and the eating it too being still not good enough or having enough upside within the standings to quote unquote ruin their lottery standings. They're kind of in a perfect spot here. They're 8-26. I really don't think can climb or fall, however you want to deem it, to anything worse than like the seventh best lottery odds. And like the difference between fifth and seventh, kind of splitting hairs, kind of marginal. Like it's a flattened lottery world, man. If you're in the top 7 or so in the odds, it's a fine place to be. There seems to be a lot of interesting players at the top of this draft. They're going to get someone good, going to get someone helpful. And so, yeah, I am like not at all concerned about them sort of playing their way out of this. They're not going to go make a run to the play-in or anything like that. This is still a team that's probably going to lose a lot of games, but it's fine if they go on a run here and win some games, surprisingly, against a very tough schedule for the next month, by the way. Then, hey, that's a good thing. That's like an unbelievably good thing. If Quickley comes back and it instantly translates to, oh, they can like hang with good teams. I don't know how that's anything but a good thing in the grand scheme of things. And then, yeah, we'll see how they kind of played at the end of the year. That back part of the schedule against a lot of very bad teams is going to be interesting in terms of how they maneuver that, how they deal with it. But they've banked so many losses at this point, and they're so far behind in the standings that it feels like they can just kind of pretty freely just throw their guys out there and say, hey, let's see what you got. Go play some basketball, and we'll figure things out in a month or two and kind of reevaluate where we sit. But this is good. Like they're not sort of at risk of quote unquote spoiling the tank just because they got their guys back and are playing functional basketball again. Like, again, they're still going to lose games. They're probably not going to beat the best teams. That's going to happen. They're going to lose. They're going to have nights where they don't look as good as they did last night. The Nets are terrible, obviously. This needs to be noted in all of this. But they can actually play meaningful, informative, progressive basketball that kind of tells you what is going on with this group without the fear of, oh no, we're picking 11th now. It's a great thing. It's really nice. We're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for rocking with the show, hanging out, and being here. I feel quite energized talking about this team now that they have their point guard back. Looking forward to continuing that. We'll have Toxic Positivity Friday again tomorrow. Hopefully we can get Katie along for that. We'll be back again next week, of course, as we kind of get out of the holiday groove or get back into the groove after the holidays where there's been no groove at all. And I've been sick and there have been missed episodes and stuff like that. Back to sort of full functioning capacity next week, 5 shows a week, 5 newsletters a week, all the good stuff as we hopefully talk about a team that's playing some interesting hoop. What a thing. What a world. You can go and subscribe for free to the newsletter. Link in the description of the podcast or the QR code on your screen. You can also go and join the Discord. Link in the description of the podcast. It's free to do it. It's a great thing. And of course, you can find me on Blue Sky. You can find the show on Instagram. Go follow, go support, and I appreciate you very, very much. We'll talk to you again on Friday with another episode of Locked On Raptors. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye. Air.